Now this video is very much out of the norm of what I normally talk about. This is a camera channel. I talk about camera gear and camera equipment, but I am working on a desk setup video for my editing station here in my office. And part of that was to get a desk shelf. And because I'm not willing to spend $300 to $700 on a Grovemade or Bololo desk shelf, I figured I'd give it a go and make my own. So for me, the easiest way to do this was to basically see what kind of dimensions I needed and then go down to Lowe's and just buy some lumber. For my monitor stand that I have that's built onto my monitor that I'm going to be using, I need about 9 inches of depth, which is the same depth as the Grovemade large desk shelf. So went down to Lowe's and I picked up a 1x10x6. Now I'm obviously not going to be making a 6-inch or a 6 foot long desk shelf, so we're going to cut that down to size. Now the only tools that you're going to need to actually build out this whole project are a few clamps, some wood glue and sandpaper. That's kind of it. Now, you might need a saw, but you could just take it to Lowe's and they can actually cut it for you there. So if you don't have a saw, you can just get them to make these cuts for you. But in theory, that's all you really need. A saw of some description, sandpaper or a hand sander is a whole lot easier, like some sort of palm sander. Some glue and some clamps. Now, clamps are super cheap. You can get them like, I got a pack of 4 for about $30 and they're really easy to use and it just works great. So what I did was I grabbed a 1x10x6. I tried to look for one with a pretty nice grain on it and this was the only one that was really reasonable. A lot of them didn't look very good. This is just cheap pine and it cost me no more than $14 I think it was. I can't remember exactly. I'll put it on the screen here, and that is all the materials that I'm going to need to build this entire shelf. Now as for the top piece, so I've got this 1x10. I wanted about 48 inches long. I wanted a 4-foot shelf. Now we're just going to use little sections at the end of this board as our legs. The height of the legs that I decided to go for was 3.5 inches. What I did was made 3 cuts at the end of the board, taking 3.5 by 10 inch segments of the board, and I'm going to set these aside later as these are going to be the legs for the whole shelf. Now the rest of the board, I think I had about 13.5 spare inches on the end here, so what I did was I just chopped that off, and we're going to use this part as our little mini shelf that goes underneath the main top of the desk shelf. Now what I kind of wanted, I don't know if the Grovemade ones actually have this, but I wanted a little bit of an overhang between the edge of the top part of the shelf and where the legs hit. I wanted a little bit of an overhang just so that it's not, perfectly flush the whole way around. So I basically took the 3 legs that I had and the shelf part and I took 1 inch off of the depth, meaning that they're no longer, 9.25 was their actual before I cut them down, and I brought them down to about 8 to 8.5, anywhere in and around there. That just gives me a little bit of an overhang at the edge of the shelf that I will show you at the end of this video. Now once we have the legs sectioned off, I'm using this flat piece, the spare part. We're just going to call it the mini shelf, the little bit that goes on the underside of the main shelf. What we're going to do is we're going to attach that between 2 of the legs, and this is just going to give us a little side shelf if we want to put a notebook or some papers or anything in there. And very simply, all you need to do is just add some glue and then you can clamp it up. I actually didn't have clamps large enough for this, so I just put a couple of nails in on either end just to hold it in place while the glue set. Left that to the side for a few hours while that set, and once it was done, it's a solid piece. So I've got my sets of legs here. I've got the little H shelf part over here that's going to go on the side, and the single leg that's going to go over on the left hand side. And all I did was I spray painted these black just to give it a nice sort of hidden look. It just keeps it nice and neutral. But again, you could just stain these with whatever stain you're using for the top piece. I think it would look just fine, but I prefer the look of the black. Now as for the top piece, this is where things get a little bit more involved. So I've got this 1x10 cut down to about 48 inches. What I kind of want to do with this piece is I want to sand it down, and one of the additions that I want to add is rounded corners on each end. I'm not going to be able to do the tapered edge the whole way around this board because I don't own a router and I don't have the patience to try and do that with sandpaper. But I actually really like the way that it looks without the tapered edge. I just like the flat edge. What I am going to do is I'm going to take our Minmax stain and I'm going to use that with a pencil and just draw a line around each corner, giving me a little bit of a template of giving me a nice rounded edge on each corner of the 1x10. And using my saw, you can do this with any saw that you have, whether it's a miter or a handsaw like I'm using here, or even just a handsaw would work just fine. I'm going to just cut diagonally across, take my sandpaper or my hand sander and just try to slowly blend this edge to give me a nice rounded corner. Rinse and repeat, do that on all 4 corners and you've got a nice looking top plate here, and already you're starting to see a pretty cool shape take place. Now this is cheap pine, it's not an expensive wood, obviously you can see that the grain on this wood is not particularly attractive. So if you're wanting to get a much nicer looking piece, you may want to look into getting some cedar or maybe some walnut, as those are a bit more expensive. I decided to just go with cheap pine for today. Now the thing that really is going to bring out the style of this piece is wood stain. So I like to use Minmax's special walnut stain. It does give it a slightly walnut-ish color, but it's a bit lighter than a lot of sort of black walnut or older pieces like that. And very simply, I'm just taking an old rag and I'm applying some of this stain across the entire board, trying to get it spread on nice and evenly, and it ended up looking pretty good in my opinion. So in theory, we have the look that we're going for. You could call it there, but I would always recommend sealing any woodworking that you're doing, any shelf that you're building, and with epoxy, polyurethane, or whatever type of sealant that you want to use. I'm going to use polyurethane. So what I did with the polyurethane, much like the stain, is I just applied it across the whole top and sides of the board. And for the keen-eyed of you, yes, I did forget to do the underside, which I only noticed right whenever I was going to attach the legs later on, but you know what, nobody's going to see it and it doesn't really bother me. So I applied my polyurethane, and polyurethane in the end, it comes out a little bit rough. So what they recommend doing is just sand it. So I took some 220 grit sandpaper, you could do up to 400 grit or whatever you wanted to do, sand it down, get it nice and smooth, apply more polyurethane, let that set. It takes about 4 or 5 hours, and depending on the type of polyurethane that you're using, some can take a lot longer, some can be really quick. I left it for a few hours between each one until it was dry, sanded it, second coat, sanded it again, third coat, sanded that one, and I think after the third coat I was pretty happy with the color and the seal of it. And once that was dry, it looks fantastic. All I had left to do was to flip it over, expose the horribly not sealed underside of this board, and take my leg pieces. I lined them up. What I did was I measured out about 5 inches from either end, and very simply I just applied some wood glue onto the legs and set those where I wanted them, left them for a few hours for the glue to set, and removed the clamps. And there you have it. There's your desk shelf. It's incredibly easy to do. So just to clarify again, I'm not a woodworker, okay? Like, my dad's big into woodwork and he taught me some stuff when I was a kid, but so, you know, I've got a very basic understanding of some stuff, but it's amazing what you can build with some sandpaper, a handsaw if that's all you had, and some wood glue and a clamp. You can build a really nice looking desk shelf that can make for a pretty sweet looking desk setup. And you don't have to spend $500 on a shelf. And honestly, it was a lot of fun to do. I really enjoyed doing it. While I was building the desk shelf, I was also building this concrete style desk, which we're going to talk about in my other video a little bit more. But a quick message to the woodworkers who are in this, who have come to watch this video, as a complete amateur who has absolutely no clue what I'm doing. Let me know what you think of this very cheap, very easily made product, and leave some recommendations in the comments down below of how you might have done it without using all of the tools that you might have available in a workshop. That's about all I have for this. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button, drop a comment down below, or maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.